Well, I don't know about all that. I just got a pretty good head start on most people. I had no idea that I would be using my background in communication and tech writing to do this work today, but what an honor it is to get up every day and help figure out ways to help our children, our families, our communities, our colleagues, and our world. So thank you everybody for taking the time on a rainy night and being here. Steve is recording this, and they will probably be able to put that out on their website. If I can get a link, I can also upload it to my YouTube channel, and we'll see if we can get that out to everybody. So thank you again to our friends in Rhode Island. They've been working tirelessly on this issue as well. And I have to say, what a privilege, because shoulder to shoulder, that's how we get things done. So like most of you, at some point I had no idea there was anything to be concerned about with wireless. I spent 8 years bringing it into my children's schools when the industry was bringing in their 21st century classroom. And our little town of Ashland, Massachusetts, our budgets were cut to the bone. And we didn't have funding to keep getting and then replacing all this equipment. So, good to be parents, we jumped in and started doing fundraising. And we got wireless infrastructure, and we got iPads and Chromebooks and smartboards and minis. And all this stuff that we were being told was going to help our kids succeed in the world. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy, who has chronic Lyme disease, as do all 4 of her children. Wendy's an engineer, so she hits things systematically. And she was then reading a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman, and it was inferring that there is something very wrong with wireless. So Wendy mentions it at book group, and I was just like, that's not the book we were just. So I just made a mental note of it. And then not long after that, something crossed my desk where I was the grant coordinator for Ashland Public Schools, and I read something inferring the same harm from today's wireless, and I went, oh, well, is there any science to this? And being a tech writer, I just went, let me go look. And I was astounded to find literally thousands of pages of scientific evidence of harm, peer-reviewed, published studies in highly regarded journals. So I'm over there thinking, wow, we gotta do something, right? So before I show you the science, I just want to speak briefly about the electromagnetic spectrum. So I've learned so much on this journey. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a numbers person, I'm a word gal, I'm a writer. So I've had to learn these fun names like electromagnetic fields. The Earth has its own electromagnetic field. There was a gentleman named Schumann, and he figured it out, that the Earth pulses its own beautiful energy up to help regulate all of us that are supposed to be connected to the Earth, from flora, fauna, and you and I and our kids. We're all meant to be connected to the Earth because we get this lovely healing energy that helps to regulate all this electrical circuitry that our body uses. So the Earth pulses at Schumann's resonance, which is 7.83 times per second. That's in the Hertz range, 7.83, and we get this lovely, harmonious, free healing energy. Well, now we've gotten so fancy, and our digital technology is now pulsing in the megahertz range, and now the gigahertz range. Megahertz means 1 million times per every second it's going wham, 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 with signal and data. In the gigahertz range, it's 1 billion times per second. So Dr. Martin Blank wrote a book, and he simply called it Overpowered, because we are getting overpowered by these man-made energies in our world. So the way we can tell what these energies are is through this thing called the electromagnetic spectrum. It tells us how long the wavelengths are as the signals are coming, and how fast they're coming. So all of what we have today with wireless technology is in what we call the microwave spectrum, okay? And in that microwave spectrum, we have cell towers, and now these close-range cell towers that they call 5G. We have utility smart meters. So if any of the meters on your home to measure your usage of gas, water, electric, solar, propane, If any of those have a little thing on it called the FCC identification number, FCC ID number, that's our Federal Communications Commission, and that tells you that that device is pulsating microwave radiation. So it used to be that we had these old analog meters. You know, I'm one of 10 kids, and so when I was playing hide and seek as a kid, it could take a while to be found. So I'd be hiding in the bushes, and I'd just sit there and watch the dials go around on the old analog meter. And that device used to last for 40 or 50 years. Then the industry came in and said, we can save your town some money. Instead of having to pay the walker to come through your neighborhood and get that reading every month, well, we can bring technology to you. So in my town, we're not on the smart grid yet, but we do have digital meters, and there's a utility truck that drives through our neighborhood once a month and points a scanner at my house and gets the reading. And that's how I know what my bill's gonna be. That's how they get that data. So the smart meters or the digital meters, all of our cell phones are in the microwave spectrum, our microwave ovens, but at least they're just sitting there, not radiating until you choose to radiate, right? Baby monitors, gaming devices, satellite, Wi-Fi, all this great stuff that we've been conditioned to just accept as normal in our lives. So it's the electromagnetic spectrum, and you can see that these big long wavelengths are carrying our data and our signals and going boom, 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 boom. That's how they're getting it. Spiked erratic microwave radiation. All that's left to monetize, they've kind of sold all the spectrum for these longer waves. All that's left to monetize are these little tiny millimeter waves at the end. Millimeter's not very big, but the industry is spinning it up that we're going to have faster downloads, super highways, smart cities. And I never woke up and said I needed any of that. I don't need to have something downloaded in a split second, right? But they always put their marketing ahead of the product, and then they say, look, there's demand, everybody wants it. So now we have to put cell towers at the curb every 2 to 12 houses. That's what 5G is. At bedroom height, right outside of our homes in our public access. That's what 5G is. 5th generation technology. What the law says, so back in the 90s, the industry got a law passed called the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And what that ensured is that when you're on the go, within reason, you should be able to make an emergency phone call, right? One phone call. If there's a gap in service, then the industry can come in and say, we need to cover that gap, right? But they have a whole playbook that they deploy in our towns. They tell our towns that, gee, the Telecom Act says you have to let us put these towers in. And our towns don't know enough to say, well, do we even have a gap in coverage? And if you look at any of their maps, Verizon, AT&T, whomever, they're like boasting, we've got coverage nationwide. So where's the gap, and why do we need more cell towers? It's because they're selling new services, new business lines, like streaming, and look who's buying up the entertainment industry. It's the telecom companies and their parents. So they want to put all this new equipment in at close range because these dinky little millimeter waves can't go very far. They can carry lots of data, but they can't go very far. So and they get disrupted by stuff like rain or snow or leaves, and then you lose signal. So they've got to put these cell towers literally like every 2 to 12 houses. And that is not good for our communities. But we made this problem, and so we can fix it. And I'm so happy to announce that last night at town meeting in both Sheffield and Great Barrington, Massachusetts, they passed a town warrant article to change their zoning bylaws such that for any new applications that come in from the industry, they have to prove that the FCC, which has now been sued for ignoring the science, The courts in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, 3 judges in Washington, D.C., were presented with 27 binders of scientific and medical and citizen evidence of harm. The FCC completely ignored it. They got sued, and in August, actually it was Friday the 13th of August in 2021, I think God's got a great sense of humor, the court remanded it back to the FCC because we've learned that our federal agencies don't like to, or our federal courts don't like to tell the agencies what to do. They give it back to them and say, you gotta fix this. They remanded it back to the FCC to address this issue for the impact on children, for the impact on those with electromagnetic sensitivity, and I will teach you more about that in a moment, for infertility, for the environment. This man-made radiofrequency radiation disrupts every biological cell on the planet. So there are great things happening. So I don't want our message tonight to be to just freak you out. We broke it, we can fix it. And so the citizens of Sheffield and Great Barrington did. They put a stop to this until the FCC does its court order to bring public policy in line with the science. And you know they're going to drag that out for years and years, like they have already been doing for years. So it's up to us as citizens to just learn. And you don't have to know it all. You know, like Steve said, he fell down the rabbit hole in, 2015? I fell down in 2013, so I got a little bit of a head start. Sam Parrish is here. He's an engineer who works with shielding for his career. So there are ways. I met Sam at a Rhode Island disabilities hearing in 2015, and I was so relieved to know somebody knows how to fix this, and he's got a whole profession and career that does shielding for medical offices and so forth. So there's solutions everywhere. We just had no idea we had a problem. It's like with addiction. First we have to admit we have a problem, and then we can fix it. So when I started looking for the science, I was very grateful that about 24 of the world's leading scientists whose life's work is microwave radiation, they started culling all the science over the last 50 years or so, and they came up with something called the Bio Initiative Report, because the FCC, when they set their limits, they didn't set it on what happens biologically. They kind of took a random, I'll tell you what they did. They took this mannequin, this head called SAM. He stands for Specific Anthropomorphic Mannequin. They put a probe inside Sam's head and they had gel in there. And he was modeled after a military man in the 90th percentile of fitness, 220 pounds, 6'2" or 3", which basically represents none of us, right? They put the probe in Sam's head. They put a spacer, not even right up to the head like we use our cell phones. They put a spacer and said, how much heat would it take in, let's say, 6 minutes or half an hour or so, to heat up that gel inside of Sam's head? And that's what they set our federal public radiation exposure limits to. So the science or the industry, aka the FCC, they allow this much radiation. And when I read you the table of contents from this report, we learn that the harm is happening at hundreds of thousands of times below that level. So this is just the cover, just so you kind of know what it looks like if you go looking for it. And this is a summary of all the studies that they had up until this point in time. Just the summaries were 1,600 pages in this whole document. So, summary of key scientific evidence, damage to sperm and reproduction. So these were the studies that got me on my feet as a mom. So I had 2 teenagers at the time, and in the studies, they said that they have taken male human sperm, exposed it to the laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA, which is our roadmap to grow in anything that's growing. Changed the DNA, slowed the motility, and caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours of exposure to this laptop. And I mean, you gotta be kidding me. I just sent my oldest up to St. Mike's with her MacBook. For Christmas, we had just bought a laptop for my youngest because she went into high school. And where are both my girls using it, but right on top of their reproductive organs. So that was the day that I found my voice and got my little shaky knees together and went, well, I think we got to do something here. And it's not just the male sperm. We now have a study out of Kaiser Permanente that shows higher miscarriage rates for women who are using wireless technology. And there's much more behind it. So evidence that children are more vulnerable. Dr. Om Gandhi has done modeling to show what happens if we put a cell phone up to our head. It's going to penetrate inside my brain about a third of the way into my brain. When you put a cell phone up to a 10-year-old brain, it's going to go about 3/4 of the way into that brain. And when you put a cell phone up to the head of a 5-year-old child, it's going to penetrate almost that entire brain. Children's skulls are thinner. They have a higher water content, and we know when we put things in the microwave, it's the water that gets things cooking in there, right? So we really, really need to get on this and protect our children. We have amazing resources to help us do that. Effects, evidence for fetal and neonatal effects. You know, how many times do you see an expectant mom sitting there with her device on the bump? We need to stop that, okay? We know that, you know, scientifically, that cell repair is happening faster in the womb than at any point in a child's development, and we know it causes DNA damage. Effects on autism. So Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General. She's a Harvard pediatric neurologist, and she sees huge connections between what the science is telling us and what she sees in the families in her care with an autistic child or family member. It used to be autism was so rare, and now we have families with multiple family members with autism. It used to be in the 1970s, 1 out of 10,000 children were diagnosed on the autism spectrum disorder. And it's not just because we've gotten better with diagnoses. It's because we've ramped up the radiation, as well as all of the other environmental toxins in our communities.
Cece, excuse me, could you speak up a little, please?
Sure.
I have trouble hearing you.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. So we now have a new term in our vernacular called electromagnetic sensitivity, or it can be called electrohypersensitivity, it can be called microwave sickness, or it can be called, you know, EMF illnesses. It's all what happens when we radiate ourselves. So with great thanks to colleagues out in Michigan and our colleague Daphne Tapp over at We Are the Evidence, I'll go through a lot of things that have been well documented in our military studies from decades ago that have now been declassified. You can go out to my website at Massachusetts for Safe Technology and go to our resources page, and you can just start drilling down into everything I'm telling you tonight, including those declassified military studies. And I know we have a sign-in sheet here tonight. For anybody who would like to give your email address, I do 2 free public education webinars by Zoom every month. So as you come into the fold on this, you might want to come and refresh yourself on some of the facts. You might want to ask others to join you. You might want to share it with your town, your healthcare team, your legislators, your schools. So there's a sign-in sheet going around, and you can always just come back and learn with us. So what are microwave sickness symptoms? Let's look at the brain first. Stabbing, searing, headaches. My daughter in high school was getting a migraine, an optical migraine. What kid should be getting a migraine? So once I stopped circling my tail and I realized, hey, I'm the mom here, it's my job to take care of my family, we simply started choosing to hardwire our home, and I'll walk you through that in just a second. But once we got rid of the wireless in our house, her headaches all but disappeared unless we let her get dehydrated, or unless she let herself get dehydrated. She's in high school. Sleep. So get this. Our brain as part of our circadian rhythm, in the wee hours of darkness, releases melatonin from the pineal gland. Melatonin's got a couple of really important jobs. One, it regulates our sleep. And two, it helps to clean up the toxins from the day from everyday cell repair and regeneration. Our brain, however, can't distinguish between natural daylight and this light energy form that we created, microwave radiation. So we've got everything in our house going pulse, 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 and our brain's going, when's it going to get dark so I can release that melatonin? So for a long time, industry got away with saying, well, gee, you know, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Now we know many mechanisms of harm, okay? And that melatonin release is one of them. Dizziness, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, brain fog, chronic fatigue. And then for the ears, a lot of people have the ringing in the ears and they don't know where that came from and they can't figure out how to stop it. Humming, sharp pains in the ears, and then a lot of times people who become electromagnetically sensitive start having sensitivities to all sorts of noises in their environment. Skin. So another thing we know scientifically is that we have like little antennas in the surface of our skin that kind of help us navigate, keep us safe in our little world here. And we hear people talk about the hot ear from using the cell phone. We talk about skin rashes, itching, burning, facial flushing, and the gentleman who designed our logo for Massachusetts for Safe Technology is up in Framingham. And Chuck was having problems with his leg. It was going jiggity with the nerves. And he went to his doctor, they run the tests, they come up empty. Then you start paying money out of pocket to go see specialists. They run their tests and they come up empty. So Chuck starts doing his research and he figures out that cell phones cause nerve damage. And lo and behold, guess where Chuck carried his cell phone? Every day, all day long. So he removes the cell phone from his pocket, and over time, his leg issue goes completely away. Okay. Mood. So the science shows clearly now that this is a neurotoxin. Even before the pandemic, we were already at epidemic proportions of anxiety and depression. We are seeing suicidal ideation even among children like we have never seen in our recorded history. And how long have we been radiating ourselves and our kids, right? Another mechanism of harm, Dr. Palpatcher and others did studies to show what happens to this wonderful membrane we've got to protect the brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. And through their findings, they discovered that this jackhammering of microwaves is breaking the blood-brain barrier. So what happens when you allow leakage into this sensitive area? We wind up with a whole lot of neurotoxicity like we've never seen before. Okay. Eye pressure, behind the eyes twitching, deteriorating vision, cataracts, and then, you know, we are electrical beings. That's why we do EEGs and EKGs in the hospital. They're measuring our electrical pulses. So what happens when we overpower all these wonderful electrical organs? Well, for our heart, it can cause palpitations, arrhythmias. I hear time and again people saying, oh, it just felt like somebody was sitting on my chest. Difficulty breathing, blood pressure that goes too high or too low, depending on your own body's individual proclivity. And so oftentimes when I do a presentation like this, people say, I didn't want to know it, I didn't want to believe it, but dang it, I recognized a bunch of these symptoms. And so they'll take a chance and they'll just create a sleep sanctuary. Just turn it off at night. Give it a few days. See if anything happens, right? Some people, and so they come back and they say, oh my gosh, I slept for the first time in years. Or my children's behavior issues calm way down when we're not pulsating them with radiofrequency radiation day and night, okay? So there can be changes that quickly. I don't want to give false hope because you could have other complications going on with other illnesses or environmental exposures, but this is a big one to start addressing. So with the autism community. So I mentioned I do these free public education webinars twice a month. Anybody and their brother and mother and everybody else is welcome to come. And every now and then some of the other experts will drop in just to see, what we're doing. And there's a whole profession called building biologists. And they are highly trained to go into an indoor environment, and they can be hired to measure for mold, for VOCs, to formaldehyde, to test your water. And then there are those who are also trained as electromagnetic radiation specialists. There's one out in California, and he's part of the Building Biology Institute, and he just pops in every now and then. And so I always say, so Eric, tell us what you do. And he said, I see miracles every day in my work. And he said that he had been referred to a family by a medical doctor because the dad had spent about $250,000 trying to get help for his autistic son. And nothing was helping. So the doctor said, why don't you get a building biologist to see if there's something environmentally happening in your home? So Eric goes, he's hired by the family, he does his assessment, he gives them the report, and then they bring in an electrician to fix dirty electricity problems. That's another form of man-made energy, the electric and magnetic fields that come off the wiring in our homes. Because in commercial builds, they shield those wires with like an aluminum lining inside the wiring, but they don't do that for residential. And if it's not properly grounded and done just right, you can wind up with a lot of dirty electricity. And again, like radiofrequency, it's invisible, but it can penetrate through the walls into your living space by like 6 or 8 feet. So he cleaned up the whole house, got everything good, and he gets a letter from the mom a couple months later, and she says, Eric, I just have to tell you, his teachers are asking us what happened because he has advanced 2 grade levels in about 6 months. Here, this was a child who would just be stemming in the corner, couldn't make eye contact. He can now carry on a conversation with 3 adults at a time because they cleaned up the man-made electromagnetic fields in that home. And then he said another time he was brought in, and only the mom had arranged it. She's the only one who even knew he was in the house. First thing he does is turn everything off. He just kills the power. And then one by one he starts measuring as he turns things back on. Turns off the power, and from the back room, this 22-year-old autistic young man comes out and he goes, Mom, what just happened? The pressure in my head is gone. So our building biologists see these miracles all the time, and it's just with a little education and a little investigation on our part, because I tell people, don't take our word on any of this. Use our resources as a launch point, but go know it for yourself, because it is everywhere today, right? But we're clever. We know how to get around it. Brain tumors, the glioblastomas, Ted Kennedy, right? His family thinks it was from his cell phone. Beau Biden, President Biden's son, glioblastoma. And far too many other people, celebrity and non, are getting these tumors. And then there's genotoxicity. We talked about neurotoxicity, childhood leukemia, melatonin, again, breast cancers, men sticking it in their shirt pockets, suit pockets, women in their bras, yoga pants, back pockets. We are seeing colon and rectal cancers doubling and quadrupling right now, even with young adults who have had these things on their devices for a greater percentage of their lifetimes than you and I, right? Breast cancers for men and women are on the rise, okay? So we know that this causes stress, a breakdown of the stress proteins and DNA. We know that it causes oxidative stress. And Dr. Cindy Russell has co-founded Physicians for Safe Technology. And she has a great website to bring credibility to this issue with our healthcare practitioners. And Dr. Russell likens this to, we are rusting ourselves from the inside out because this causes oxidative stress. And these are all terms that I didn't know any of this, but I'm determined, so I figure out what this is. So our red blood cells are meant to be free-floating and bringing oxygen to all of our vital systems and organs. there's something called the rouleau effect, which in my little mind, I remember it because you guys know the candy Rolos, that stack of caramel chocolates? Well, our red blood cells are supposed to be free-floating, but they're magnetizing and turning into this chain like a stack of Rolos. And guess what? That chain can't get to where it needs to be bringing oxygen. That's not the way our bodies are built. So we now have oxidative stress, which is what is resting us from the inside out. And for chronic illnesses, the science will tell us that this oxidative stress is a huge precursor for most chronic illnesses. So that's what I learned when I started looking for the science. And so I started looking in 2013, 2014. And for 20 years, the FDA had commissioned the U.S. National Toxicology Program to investigate this issue. They made that commission back in, gosh, like literally 20 years ago when cell phones were the new technology of the day. So they went in expecting to prove that cell phones are safe. 2016, they started reporting out. 2018, they came out with their final report after an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health, which, by the way, is the world's gold standard for toxics research. This is the largest study they had ever commissioned, $30 million. And what did they find? Clear evidence of tumors, cancer. They have 5 categories they can assign. Clear evidence is the top category. Some evidence of tumors in the brains, so clear evidence of tumors in the hearts, the schwannomas, the wrapping of the heart there, the Schwann cells. Some evidence of tumors in the brains, some evidence of tumors in the adrenal gland. Where do we put our So we know scientifically, and the industry will get a hold of one of these good studies when it comes out and say, oh, that's just one study, you need to have more than one. Well, right on the heels of our cell phone study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy completed their large study on cell tower base stations. And guess what they found? Cancers and DNA damage and tumors and everything that we found here in the US. And back in 2011, the World Health Organization, they also have 5 categories. The middle one is group 2B, possible human carcinogen, and that's where they put this toxin, right there next to lead, thalidomide, chloroform, DDT, and a whole host of other chemicals that I just can't pronounce. So back in 2011 when they did that, what they were missing at the time from the body of science was the animal studies. And that's what the NTP, National Toxicology Program, and the Ramazzini Institute, and others have long since put those puzzle pieces in place. So now the World Health Organization has actually opened up a new investigation. And so as I'm learning about all this, I'm thinking to myself, surely somebody's got to have our backs on this, right? If this is as bad as little me can find just by going and looking for the science, somebody's got to have our backs, right? Well then, in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics over at the Safra Center came up with this free report that you can access online, 59 pages, called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. So I'm like, oh, you mean all these guys at the FCC work for industry and not for us? Yeah. And it's not just the FCC. We've got hard evidence that it's so many of our federal agencies. So that was like the day I lost my innocence. And I thought, okay, let's recalculate. Nobody's going to fix this for us, right? And then more recently, ProPublica came out with another expose story in November that's titled How the FCC Shields Cell Phone Companies from Safety Concerns. So we know this. We know how to talk our way through this argument now. So what happened in my schools when I started bringing this up? Well, it wasn't easy. It was not easy. I figured, the pieces were falling into place for me in the summertime, which, you know, the kids are off having fun, but it's like the busiest season for school administrators because they got to close one fiscal year, open the next, get all their staffing done, get all their training done, get all their supplies in. It's a crazy busy time. And I'm over there going, hello, I think we have a problem here. And honestly, when I told them the research that radio frequency radiation is extraordinarily harmful, and especially to children, I kind of thought they would pull the kids out of the building like if we had a gas leak in the science lab. But instead, I got crickets. Nada. And then I kept sending more information, like the French National Library pulled Wi-Fi out in 2008 because of the health risks. There were pockets in Israel and Belgium and Italy that were already removing it from the classrooms because of what we knew even at that time with the science. So the school committee chairwoman and I start sharing information back and forth, right? And I would go to school committee meetings, but you know, the industry got a really big head start with their tobacco playbook, right? Suppress the evidence of harm. Create your own science done deliberately under conditions that, hey, show no harm. But no harm is never the same thing as actually safe. Promote your toxic products. Get in bed with your politicians, right? And write the laws to protect industry. So there's the big old tobacco playbook, and it is well used today by so many of these environmental polluters. So I kept educating. One of our school committee members had been the former chair, and she knew enough to go up and look to see who the top lobbyists are in DC. And in that list of top 100 ever, it's just riddled with telecom, cable, energy, IT. That's who's walking the halls in DC and giving information that our public servants wouldn't even know to question. Okay? So it was not an easy conversation, but we ultimately became the first public school district in the United States to even have a precautionary sign hanging in our classrooms that says best practices for mobile devices. Turn those devices off when you're not using them. The industry would have us all Wi-Fi all the time. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when you need it and only for the shortest amount of time that you need it for. And always place the device on a solid surface. Can I see a show of hands if anybody in the room has an iPhone with you tonight? Okay. Let me invite you to take your iPhone out. And I want to show you something. I know how to find it in an iPhone, but if you go online and you say the make and model of your phone and just type RF exposure, you will find this fine print disclaimer. So from your phone, go into settings, and then scroll a little ways down and hit general. Give me a nod when you get there. So settings to general, okay? And then go all the way down and hit legal and regulatory. Okay? Once you're in legal and regulatory, about 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure, which is this radio frequency radiation that we've been talking about. They politely call it energy, which it is. It's man-made energy, but it's also two-way microwave radiation, and it's been in there all along, and it tells us a couple really important things. One,